Hello, I am the Miami Autism Dad, Victor Antunes, the inclusive Miami Realtor, and this is the Autism Podcast at Miami's Community Newspapers. Today, I'm with Amanda Altman, CEO of Kristi House. Welcome to the show, Amanda.
Thank you so much for having me, Victor.
I'm so glad you're here because what we're talking about today is super, super important. Now, before we get going, I want to read a short blurb about what you guys do, and then I'll start asking some questions.
Great.
Okay. Today's conversation is about childhood trauma, abuse, and exploitation, and the truth that this crisis sits closer to home than most people in Miami want to believe. Our guest is Amanda Altman, CEO of Kristi House, Miami-Dade's Children's Advocacy Center. Kristi House serves children and their families who have suffered abuse, exploitation, and trauma. Their mission is to eradicate and heal child abuse, exploitation, and other childhood traumas. We're talking about why Kristi House had to be created, the gaps it was built to address, the children it serves, and why this work matters for every family in our community. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, Amanda, tell me exactly, who you are and how Kristi House started.
So I'll start with how Kristi House started. It was founded in 1995, so we've been celebrating our 30th anniversary and actually having helped over 30,000 children and their families in that time. Mm-hmm. But we were born out of a terrible circumstance. City of Miami police detectives found a little girl. She was 9 years old and 8 months pregnant. Her stepfather had been abusing her for years, and people who should have helped her were turning a blind eye. And there weren't a lot of services available to her at that time, and the ones that were available were not coordinated in any way. So a group of community activists, including our current state attorney and many others, got together and decided we needed to do something about this to address this problem. And Kristi House was really born from that. Personally, I'm a trial attorney, practiced for almost 20 years, but I came to Kristi House about 6.5 years ago as the CEO, and I am just so proud of the work that we do there. I hate it that we have to exist, but I'm really grateful to have such a compassionate and caring space for these kids and their families.
You know, it's interesting you use the word coordinated because, these programs, they exist now, and then they exist and you assume they always existed. But no, there was a time when this coordination wasn't going on. So you've got, I guess, the Sheriff's Office, City of Miami, you guys. Who else is in this coordination?
Yeah, it's the Department of Children and Families, the Roxy Bolton Rape Treatment Center, the Guardian Ad Litem Office, who provides volunteer advocates or attorney advocates to represent the best interests of the child. We have the University of Miami's Child Protection Team, who provides forensic medical exams and specialized interviews of the kids who have been abused. We also have the State Attorney's Office, the Child Sex Battery Unit from there. And many of us are actually co-located in our main office. So the State Attorney's Child Sex Battery Unit is located within Kristi House in our main location, as is the University of Miami's Child Protection Team, and also 2 attorneys from the Guardian Ad Litem Office. So those are the members of our multidisciplinary team. We come together every single Friday at Kristi House, representatives of those organizations, to talk about the cases that have just come in and also to revisit cases along the way. That way we hold each other accountable. We make sure that no case and child falls through the cracks, and we make sure that the children and their families are getting all of the services that they need.
This is a lot of coordination.
Yes, it is.
Is there one person, one office who's the spearhead, and then it trickles down, or how does that work?
Yes, her name is Amanda Altman. I am actually the what we call the multidisciplinary team facilitator. It is actually a role. So in addition to being the CEO, I serve that function. And so it's really my responsibility to bring these organizations all together. We have quarterly supervisors meetings with heads of those organizations so that we can make sure everything's running smoothly. We are actually a nationally accredited children's advocacy center. So there are about 12 standards that we have to meet to get that accreditation. And it is my responsibility to make sure that these units are all working together to be able to get that accreditation.
Okay. Now, I think I saw on your website that your advocacy center was founded in 1999 and was the first one.
No, we were founded in 1995. Our main center opened in 1999. We were one of the first 10 in the country to be open. There are now about 932 children's advocacy centers throughout the country. In Florida, there are 26. We are the one that represents Miami-Dade County.
Is this a national program?
So it is. There's something called the National Children's Alliance. That is who accredits different children's advocacy centers like Kristi House, but they're all operated a little bit differently. Obviously, to be accredited, as I mentioned, we all have to meet certain standards, but we all operate a little bit differently. And there are things that definitely set Kristi House apart from many of the others.
You know, it's interesting that you have all these partners and they're big name partners.
Yeah.
And yet I got to tell you, like, until I got into this world, I'd never heard of Kristi House.
Yeah.
Where's the disconnect?
It's a problem that we have getting our name out there. I think it's a problem a lot of nonprofits have, unfortunately. I always say we don't want to be the best kept secret in Miami for many reasons, but unfortunately, we are still working really hard to try to get our name out there. I think one of the issues is, Victor, people don't want to think that these horrific things are happening in our backyard, but they are, and we can't turn a blind eye, no matter how much we want to, no matter how much we think if we just don't look, it's not happening. That's the total wrong thing for us to be doing, but I think that that's a little bit a part of the disconnect.
I mean, I'll tell you from my perspective, I live in my suburban bubble and you don't see these things. You hear about them, but if you don't see them day to day, you just think that, that's not really a big problem, but it is a big problem as far as like child sexual abuse and the selling of children. Miami-Dade County is a big problem.
Yeah. So, nationally, the statistics are that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 13 boys will be sexually abused before their 18th birthday. 1 in 5 children who log on to an electronic device will be sexually solicited online. Florida ranks number 3 in the nation for reported incidents of human trafficking. Many of those cases are children. And Miami-Dade County is number 1 in the state of Florida for reported incidents of human trafficking. So these are massive problems that we're facing right here in Miami-Dade County.
Let me put things in perspective. What states are 1 and 2? Do you know?
California and Texas are 1 and 2, and there's a little bit of flip-flopping, from year to year. Florida has been consistently number 3. Okay,
then, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but when I hear California, Texas, Florida, the common denominator I see is a lot of immigration from Latin America. Is that what's driving it?
So that is certainly part of it, I would say. But interestingly, a lot of our exploitation clients are girls and boys who were born and raised in Miami-Dade County. And so while I do think that the immigration is definitely an issue, I think there are other factors that are driving those numbers as well.
All right. And then back to the being the best kept secret. How do you have victims coming to you, or are you always going out and searching for them?
So that's a great question. And actually, I was just speaking to our clinical director yesterday, and a lot of our referrals currently are actually self-referrals. So typically, I would say our referrals come from our partner organizations. So our law enforcement partners, the state attorney's office, the child protection team, the Department of Children and Families. But lately, we are seeing a lot of referrals coming from the schools and then also self-referrals. We have a prevention education team who is out in the community doing a lot of education. They are educating kids whenever we can, but we also find that really educating other service providers, educating the school counselors, the school resource officers, the PE teachers who are the one who are teaching our kids health, educating those people is so critical. And so I just heard today that we have surpassed the 30,000 mark just for this year in how many people we've reached with our prevention education training. So I'm really thrilled about that.
Now, the self-referral, I have to assume that for a kid who's being, abused right now, that's really traumatic to like self-refer yourself.
It is incredibly traumatic, and it is really also traumatic for the families. I think we forget about that sometimes. It's a lot of times it's the child having to tell their family member that this is happening to them. And so it's hard for a parent to have to hear that from their child, and there's so many emotions that the parents also go through. And so I always applaud those parents or children who have self-referred, because that is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. Talking about like educating the educators, I have a friend, Sandra Bermudez from the Lucy Project.
Yeah.
Okay. So Sandra doesn't teach the kids. She teaches the teachers who then teach the kids. So do you have like something like that where you have people from your organization that go to the schools and educate the educators who then hopefully trickle it down? Is that how that works?
That's how it works. So we try, if we can, to actually get into the classrooms and educate the kids. It's a little challenging to be able to do that for a variety of reasons. So we have pivoted just a little bit to trying to reach the educators more. So for example, before school started this year, we were at Miami-Dade County Public Schools for their big teacher workshops, and we were educating, as I mentioned, the counselors, the school resource officers, and also many of the teachers as well. It's really important. That's the first line of defense in these kinds of cases. Really more than 50% of the cases, I would say, are reported by school personnel. And so it's really critical that we're able to get in there and educate that group of people.
Mm-hmm. I'm a 70s kid, and I remember coming home from school. We still watched television back then. Yeah. You'd come home and there'd be these PSAs on TV, teaching you stuff about life. Like I remember learning how to cross the street from PSA.
Oh yeah, sure.
Look left, right, left again. It's it was a little ditty. It's ingrained in my brain, and whenever I go to a street, I'm like left, right, left again, because it taught me.
Yeah.
So and I've often thought it was effective for me, and I can't be the only kid from back then that thinks those were effective. Right. And I don't know that we have that kind of system anymore, because those PSAs, I think they were paid for by the government.
Yes, I believe so back then. Yeah.
So I'm wondering to educate these kids, because I've been talking to a lot of police detectives.
Yeah.
You have drug problems, sexual abuse,
right.
blah blah blah, and blah, blah, blah. I didn't mean to say it like that. No. But you've got all these problems. And I think that if there was a PSA system directly to the kids, maybe in the schools, that would be super effective.
We don't really have things like that in place right now. Most things, at least on TV, are pay to play. So, costs money to be able to do those things. Even like billboards on the highway, it's rare that you can get those kinds of things donated, although occasionally you can. The school systems, it's interesting here because of certain laws that we have in place in Florida. It can be difficult for us to get in to do education for the kids. There's a lot of opportunity for parents to opt out of things, which can add a burden on the teachers if we're coming in. And so it can be a challenge.
Okay. And what comes to mind also is social media. I mean, you could use that, but that's probably also a problem.
We use social media as much as we possibly can. I don't know how effective it is at getting to the kids.
Yeah, it's the getting to the kids.
Yeah.
The last mile.
Yeah. We try to do a lot of stuff with after school programs. We work with a lot of other organizations wherever we can to get to the kids, in whatever way we possibly can. But it's not as easy as it should be.
No, it never is. Now, you offer evidence-based trauma therapy, victim advocacy. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So the core programs that Kristi House itself offers. So Kristi House is the Children's Advocacy Center. It's the overarching sort of body over all of the different agencies that we just talked about when it comes to these abuse cases. But then Kristi House itself provides services. So we've talked a little bit about the prevention education that we do, but really, our core programmatic services are evidence-based trauma therapy. And I believe we have the absolute best trained trauma therapists anywhere. In fact, when we had a visit from our accreditation folks, they were so impressed with the wide variety of modalities, therapeutic modalities that our therapists are trained in. And then our victims advocacy services is another really core component of our program. And that isn't just for the child, that's also for the families. A lot of times our families are coming in and the abuse or trauma that the child is facing is really just one issue that family is dealing with. And so we know that we can give a child all the therapy in the world, but if they're not going to a stable, secure home, it really doesn't do them that much good. So we really want to make sure that the family is stabilized. And so our advocates are out in the field working with the families, connecting them to whatever benefits they might need. And what I love about this program is it isn't just our advocates handing them a card or handing them a form to fill out. It's them really holding their hands and taking them where they need to go to get access to whatever they might need.
Now, on the website, I saw some initials. TFCBT, EMDR, what is all that?
So TFCBT is trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. That's the primary therapeutic modality we used. It works really for all kinds of childhood traumas. It's designed to last between 15 and 18 sessions. So you can move a child through it pretty quickly. The first few sessions are really designed to give the child coping skills. So if they're coming to us, they're probably exhibiting signs of trauma, whatever those may be. And so we're giving them the coping skills to really be able to go about their normal lives and cope with the trauma while we then help them process it. EMDR is a rapid, I believe I don't know what the acronym stands for, but it's a rapid eye movement type of therapy that's used.
Okay.
I get all of the acronyms confused sometimes when it comes to the different therapeutic modalities. We have some RRFT, I believe, that is really focused on the family as a whole. So we do some family therapy as well. And we really encourage the families to be part of the healing process for the child when we can. I mean, some of our children are removed from their families. They're removed from the home because it's not safe for them. So, but when we can, we really try to engage the families and the caregivers in the care.
Okay. Now, something that I learned recently talking to our friend Kimberly at Citrus is that orphanages are no longer a thing.
No.
It's all the foster care system.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that when you remove a kid from the house, they're going to foster.
Yes.
How does that work?
Well, it's a really tough process. So they are typically going to a foster care family that is trained, obviously, to be a foster care family. But, imagine being a little kid going through this trauma, and then you're plucked out of your home and you're put with a family you don't know. It's another traumatic experience for that child. We hope that sometimes they're removed from the home and there's another family member that they can go to. For example, I was discussing a case yesterday with our clinical director, and the children were removed from the parents and are now residing with the grandmother. I mean, that's a much better situation than having to put them with a family they don't know. But obviously the most important thing is that the child is safe. So if that's what's necessary, then that's what's going to happen. We're really lucky and grateful to have so many wonderful foster care families in our community.
Yeah. And for the benefit of people that are listening, I was talking to Kimberly at Citrus.
Yeah.
She's coming on the podcast, but we were just
great.
talking. Yeah, she's a great person. So we were talking, separately of the podcast, and they really do go to great lengths to keep the kids in the family.
Yes.
Not with the abuser, but with a grandmother, an uncle, an aunt. So they do a really good job of that.
It's the best situation.
Yes.
It's the best situation for the child. So they really try. Family reunification is the number one goal of the child welfare system. Obviously not with the person who, if it's abuse, not with the abuser. But if it's a family where they can be reunified, that is absolutely the goal.
Now, in your facility down south in Homestead, there's going to be multiple groups working out of there. Tell me about the multiple groups.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about this project. It was a big leap of faith for us, but we partnered with another organization called Mujer, who really addresses domestic violence issues. And we were awarded a grant from the Miami Foundation to purchase property in, for us, we were looking in the Homestead area with Mujer. Of course, we never do anything small. So instead of just purchasing a place that Mujer and Kristi House could operate out of, we purchased a 31,000 square foot property and decided to really build a service hub right in downtown Homestead on North Chrome Avenue, where other organizations that have missions that align with ours could have space. And so currently we have Kristi House and Mujer operating out of there. We also have an organization called Start Off Smart. We have Wesley House, which is one of the full case management agencies. We also currently have a small school operating there. But, the goal is to really bring some of our partner agencies into this space. And we're talking to a lot of different ones: Survivors Pathways, Foster Care Review, even the county for their CVAC, their Victims Advocate Center is looking for some space down there. So we're really excited to build over the next, I'd say 5 years, this service hub where people can come and, you take a woman who's been a victim of domestic violence and she has kids. Well, while mom's getting services at Mujer, the kids can come to Kristi House and get therapy that they need. And so it's just such an easy thing for people. We want people to have easy access to services. And we know that in Miami-Dade County, that's a difficult thing.
The traffic is horrible.
Traffic. I mean, we're a very geographically spread out city, or county rather, and with the traffic issues and the lack of good public transportation, it's a problem. And that's why, Kristi House over the years has looked at where is our client population and where do we need to open offices to serve that population. The west part of the county is where we're kind of missing the mark right now. The beach, we're kind of missing the mark right now. So hopefully one of these days, we'll be able to look at expanding into those places.
It's interesting you mentioned, and I'm from here, so geographically, I know Dade County.
Yeah.
So I know the west part of the county and I know the beach, and I know that there's sexual exploitation going on in both places, but it's going to be very different. Or am I wrong about that?
The beach potentially is very different, but sexual exploitation of kids, we see the cases happen very similarly, no matter where they are. I mean, every case is different, of course. Every case has different nuances. What happened to these children is different in every case. But surprisingly, the way that it happens is very often the same way. And it's not what you might think. So when I started at Kristi House, I had really no idea what commercial sexual exploitation of children or of adults looked like. And I always thought about the movie Taken with Liam Neeson, and, somebody's plucked off the street and forced into this life, and they're chained and, held against their will. That's not really what it looks like most of the time. It's really much more of a grooming situation. And so, you think that your trafficker is your friend or your lover or your boyfriend, and that they're going to take care of you. And this slowly builds over time, over a period of months usually, before you're forced into this life of exploitation and trafficking. And it's rare also that we see that these victims are physically restrained. It's usually more of a psychological restraint. They also tend to get them, the traffickers will often get these kids hooked on alcohol, and then of course worse substances, drugs. We deal with a lot of substance abuse issues when kids first come to us. And so it's really just this grooming process over time, and that tends to happen no matter where it is in Miami-Dade County.
I have a question for you about the grooming process.
Yeah.
You take your kids to school, you see a lot of kids there. I assume some of them are in this grooming process. Are there things to look for where you as the parent could be looking for stuff?
Yeah. So, if your child's being groomed, a lot of times their friend group will suddenly change. They might have items that You don't know where they came from. You don't give them a cell phone or a smartphone, and suddenly they have a new iPhone. You see them carrying luxury items that you did not give them. They tend to get more isolated from their family and their friends because that's what a trafficker wants, right? To get them isolated from the people who love them, who might figure out what's going on. Those are some of the things that we really start to see. They're hanging out with a different group. They're isolated. And the appearance of goods is also a big thing. Also, look, I know kids are on devices a lot. All kids are. But we see a lot of solicitation happening online, on social media, on, apps that I'm not really even that familiar with, to be honest. Snapchat's a big one. And so I think, if your child's holed up in their room on their device a lot, you've really got to pay attention to that. And I always feel badly when I'm telling parents this because I know parents are overwhelmed with things as it is. But paying attention to what your kids are doing on those devices is critical. And if that means, making sure your child is only on those devices when they are in your family room and kitchen, when you can be watching, so be it. My stepson used to love to play video games, and he would put on headphones, and I had no idea who he was chatting with on those headphones. And so my husband or I would sometimes go in and put on a pair of headphones and play a game with him to see who he was chatting with. He hated it, of course, but we have to do these things. We don't know who's out there.
Now, there are going to be kids who are more attractive because of their living situation to traffickers.
Of course.
Tell me about that so we as parents can know that we're not one of those parents.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, but look, traffickers are looking for kids who have some vulnerability that they can pounce on and prey upon. So obviously kids who come from a single parent home, kids who are struggling in school, kids who are already maybe a little bit isolated from social circles, kids socioeconomics can play a part, certainly. Those are vulnerabilities. But I have to be honest with you, Victor. I mean, I think back to my 12 and 13-year-old self and think I came from a divorced home, but I came from a good family. I had great parents. And yet, if somebody had paid attention to me back then, I could have been very vulnerable to that. And that scares me because even kids who come from good families are susceptible. We have so many families now where both parents work. They're not home when kids get home from school, and kids can be craving something, that attention. So we just really have to be vigilant.
Now, you have some key programs I want to ask you about.
Sure.
So you have and I'm going to say it like a Spanish person, okay? Proyecto Brazos Abiertos, which is Project Open Arms.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
So we started that project about 2019, and it actually started because we received a grant from the federal government. That was really to help unaccompanied minors, so kids who had come across the border by themselves and suffered tremendous trauma. Most likely they suffered trauma in the country that they left. They probably suffered trauma as they were coming across the border. They're suffering trauma as they get here. And so that was the impetus of that program. And we still have therapists who really specialize in helping those unaccompanied minors.
When you say unaccompanied, I just find that frightful.
Yeah,
what are the ages of these kids?
Tiny, 5 years old.
How do they come unaccompanied?
5 to 15.
They don't just hop on a bus.
Parents pay somebody to bring them a mule to bring them over.
And I just assume that, of course, you're going to suffer abuse. You're 5 years old, whatever, you're pretty, you're handsome, you're going to suffer abuse.
Yes.
Wow, that's horrible. And then, obviously with that name, it's all in Spanish. These are going to be mostly kids from Latin America coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, with the current political atmosphere, what is, what these kids, they come to you, however they get to you, and they're undocumented. What happens?
So if they come to us, they're living with a family, right? They're being housed with a family. When we started that program, we actually had therapists embedded in some of the homes, some of the group homes for these children. That didn't work so well because the kids were being transferred so frequently that, we might do an intake with the child, and the next day when we would go to start therapy, they were gone, having been moved somewhere else. So now the kids are with a sponsor, typically from the United States, that they've been matched with. And look, we don't ask those questions, but I will tell you that in the current climate, I think we are definitely seeing a decrease in those types of cases.
But can these kids either self-refer or refer to you knowing that they won't be deported, let's say?
They can refer.
Or that you won't?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
They can?
Yes,
okay.
absolutely.
So we're still at that 100%.
Point, where they
can come to you safely?
Absolutely. We don't ask. We don't. Okay. We will not report it to anybody. It is, whatever we know is confidential.
Right. And I've had people that work with this demographic, and I always ask them the same question: can people come to you safely? And the answer still is yes.
We are still a safe space.
Okay, that's really important because people, you're there, but maybe if I turn myself in, I'm back, wherever I was from a month later, and that's not what I want either.
Encouraging people and making people understand that is very challenging. Okay. Very challenging if the parents are undocumented.
Of course.
Very challenging. And that's where I think we're seeing a really big decrease in cases right now.
Yeah, I don't know what the solution is. All right. You also have Project Gold. Tell me about that.
Mm-hmm. So Project Gold is our human trafficking specific program. So for commercially sexually exploited children. And it was founded we started really addressing this issue in 2007. We were really on the front lines with the state attorney's office in addressing trafficking cases. But in 2014, we opened this very specialized program. Even today, there is not a lot of evidence-based methods for caring and treating individuals who have been commercially sexually exploited. So we are at the forefront of helping to create some of those evidence-based things. And so it is a drop-in center. It's not a residential facility, but it is run out of a house in an undisclosed location, so that it's safe. And the kids come all day, really. A lot of times, of course, when school is in session, it's after school, and they get wraparound services. So that includes individual therapy, group therapy. They get group life skills courses. We have mentors on staff who have lived experience. We have advocates who are similar to the victims' family advocates we discussed at Kristi House. We also have a education and jobs program. So, for a long time, we were only really addressing the therapeutic needs of these individuals, and then we discovered, okay, great, you can give them therapy, but they can't see a path forward. So it's hard to get them out of the life. So we help them with education. We have somebody who, goes to their schools, meets with their counselors, meets with their teachers. If they want to get their GED, helps them with that. And then we have somebody who really helps them, whether it's getting their first job or it's putting them on a career path, really helps them with that. We have a full-time tutor on staff. Mm-hmm. So that's just a really special program. GOLD is an acronym. It started as Girls Owning Their Lives and Dreams, which the first group at Project Gold came up with themselves. I am very proud to say that today it stands for Girls and Guys Owning Their Lives and Dreams, because through a grant that we received from the Department of Justice, we've been able to expand to serving males. Very interestingly, people think of this human trafficking issue as specific to girls and women. It is not. The research is not particularly great, but at least about 33% of the cases involve males.
So a third. That's a lot.
It's a lot.
That's not a small amount.
It's a lot.
Now you get these kids and, going through therapies. Now you guys also address problematic sexual behaviors, and it's super important because because today's abused kid is tomorrow's abuser. So how are we breaking that chain?
Yeah, so our problematic sexual behavior program, it is an evidence-based therapeutic program. Again, in fact, we just got some new therapists trained out in Oklahoma on PSB, and that is a group session. So these are kids who have exhibited these problematic behaviors, and it could be that you have a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old kid, let's say, who's exposed himself to a 7-year-old. Look, you're not going to prosecute that kid, right? You want to teach that child that what he or she did is wrong and why they shouldn't be doing that and how to manage those behaviors. And so that's a group programming session that our therapists run. And it's very interesting. I've actually participated before because they have the kids all in one group with 2 therapists, and they have the parents or caregivers in another room with 2 therapists. And they're teaching them a parallel course so that the parents can reinforce at home what the children have been learning. And it's a fabulous program that works extremely well for these kids.
I was in this class, and a detective from the sheriff's office came to talk to us, and he was from the sex crimes bureau. And he said they had one case where a 9-year-old was abusing a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
And they asked the 9-year-old, they finally break him, which is probably pretty, he's 9 years old.
Right.
Broke down crying, my uncle. Mm-hmm. And then I asked, okay, the 9-year-old, you can't send him to prison because he's 9. And it's like, yeah, there was therapy for that kid. And it's great that there's a system now because I'm guessing that before 95, at some point there was nothing.
No, there was nothing. Yes, there was nothing.
Yeah.
It's a really great program. In fact, I participated obviously on the adult side of the program, and I thought every parent should take this because it's just some of the sessions were so relevant no matter whether your child had done anything or not. I mean, children have access to so many things that you and I growing up in the 70s and 80s did not have. And they see so much and they learn so much. We were just talking yesterday about this 10-year-old little boy, and the things that he Googles and the things that he knows about are incredible. And I don't mean that necessarily in a good way. And so, really that particular course is good for really anybody.
What course is that?
The problematic sexual behavior course. It's really, I wish that every parent could take it, honestly.
I mean, they could at least have that at the public schools. That's an obvious place to do it. Yeah. Okay. Now you're also going to have, obviously with these kids, there's going to be substance abuse.
Yes.
That goes on with the trauma.
It does. And substance abuse, unfortunately in Miami-Dade County, we don't have great programs to address substance abuse issues for kids. So we don't really handle those cases in-house. If they have a true substance abuse problem and that needs to be addressed before we can even start therapy, we have to refer them out to somebody else to deal with that issue. But it can be tough. There aren't a lot of programs that we can refer them to.
Well, Homestead is like the far south part of the county. Yeah. Are there programs down there locally, or are you busing? No, where would they go then?
No. Yeah. No, we would have to work out a program somewhere else with them.
But it's not like...
And we have transportation, so we would help transport them if necessary.
But it seems like there's a lot of work to do there.
There's a lot of work to do in the substance abuse area.
Which is a shame because, Miami-Dade County, we're associated with a lot of drugs.
Yeah.
And it's not for nothing.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that, with that association and the reality that there's not more services, especially for the kids.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Now, earlier you mentioned about job training, career training. Do you have a success story?
Do I? Oh gosh, I have many success stories, but we have had kids in our human trafficking program who have gone on to medical school. We have had kids who have gone on to law school. We have lots of kids who themselves want to go on to study criminal justice or go on to study some kind of mental health. And so, I think those are some of our greatest stories, of course. My favorite story of recent times is actually more along the sexual abuse lines. We had a young woman who had been sexually abused and was very traumatized. And so what people don't realize is not only was it affecting her daily life, but she also couldn't did not want to testify against her abuser. And if you don't have that, if you don't have the victim witness, the state attorney's office really can't prosecute that case. And so that abuser was potentially going to go free. And, through the work that she did in therapy at Kristi House, with the help of her victim's advocate at Kristi House, being able to work with the state attorney's office in the same building, having a guardian ad litem, she went on to apply for college. She got in with a full scholarship. She plans to study criminal justice. But not only that, she was ready then. She had the confidence to want to testify against her abuser. And I think that this justice piece is a big thing that people don't realize sometimes about Kristi House and about how we help. And I think so much about that case because I think if there was not a Kristi House, what would have happened to this young woman? But I also think about how many more victims would there have been because that abuser would have gone free? And so when you look at how to me, that story is such a great example of how this coordinated approach to these cases works. And that's one of my favorites. It's a recent story.
That's a good one. Now, you mentioned if it wasn't for Kristi House, where does your funding come from? Is it public, private?
So we have about 60% of our funding is government grants right now. And then 40% is our generous community donating, whether it's corporate partners, individuals, family foundations. That's where about 40% of our funding comes from. We're really trying to work hard to bring that government funding percentage down a little bit because, as we all know, government cuts are happening at every level of government right now. And so challenging times for sure.
Now, for potential donors that are looking at you guys, they're saying this is a worthy cause. I'd like to donate, but I'm scared that my money would be just not well used. And, and that's not just you guys, it's any nonprofit. Are you a nonprofit?
Yes, we are a 501c3.
How do donors know when they're evaluating a nonprofit that their money is going to go actually to the end user or the victims?
Of course. Well, we have independent audits done every single year, and I'm obviously very proud that every year we have clean audits. We have about 83 cents on the dollar that goes directly to our programmatic work. A lot of our funding goes to salaries. We have about 25 full-time therapists on staff. I mean, that's where the programmatic dollars really go into. We don't have a great need for things. We have a great need to provide funding for our staff. We're very transparent with our books. We're always happy for anybody to come in and take a look. We are, because we have so many government grants, we are constantly being audited, constantly. So we do our own independent audit every year, of course, but we are constantly being audited by various governmental entities. And so I think anybody could be extraordinarily confident that their dollars are going directly to these programs for the most part. Obviously, we have some administrative needs. It always amazes me, nobody wants to pay the CEO's salary. Nobody wants to pay the CFO's salary. But if you don't have those people, you can't run an organization. So, the other, I said 83%, on the dollar, or 83 cents on the dollar is really going to the programmatic. The rest of the money, the other 17 cents, has to go towards just general overhead type things, which are critical as well.
And I think it's very naive for people to think that you're all going to be volunteers. Because if you were a volunteer, you were independently wealthy before, or you're homeless yourself. I mean,
so it's interesting. We had a board chair not long ago who came to me and said, why aren't we using more volunteers and less staff for certain things? And I love volunteers. I'm a volunteer myself at many different places, but, volunteers don't have the same level of accountability as staff do. And, for something like a therapist, a child needs to have the same therapist the entire time they're with us. Now, of course, sometimes things happen that are beyond our control and a therapist leaves in the middle of a case for whatever reason, but that's rare. So you can't have, you can't rely on volunteers to be able to do things like that. It's not realistic.
No, and I volunteer too, but it's like gaps. Okay, like for Thanksgiving, I volunteered to deliver meals.
Right.
So that's a good volunteer job because anybody can drive their car.
Yes.
But I'm not doing therapy. I'm not running the business of Kristi House like you're doing. So it's just naive to think that that's all going to be volunteers. It just could never be.
It's not. It's not possible. No.
Now, you talked about this success story. Do kids age out of your system? Like if a kid is referred to at 17 and they turn 18 and they're still suffering all this trauma, where do they go then?
We would never age them out that way. So if a child, and I'd say a 19-year-old is still a child in my opinion, but if a 19-year-old called us, we would have to refer them someplace else. And we have many referral partners that we can use. But if a child is 17 when they come to us and they turn 18, we will continue until as long as that child needs us. If a child came to us when they were 15 or 11 and, at 25, they are re-exhibiting some trauma symptoms, we would allow them to come back to Kristi House for services. Our human trafficking program is a little bit different. We really take kids up until about 24 there. We don't stop at 18 because that 18 to 24 is a critical time for them. Sometimes they're aging out of foster care and they're going to be on their own. Frequently, they have kids themselves at this point, and they need a lot of assistance. And so we take young adults up to 24 in our human trafficking program. And once they're in that program, we say they're a member of the program for life. So they can keep coming to us for as long as they need to. The trauma that is associated with human trafficking is very complex trauma, and these survivors tend to have a lot of needs and long-term needs. Now,
on the website, talking about long-term, on the website, healing trauma is a long, non-linear process. Explain that.
It's like grief. Grief is non-linear, right? You have good days, you have bad days. Trauma is very similar. I mentioned that in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, the first few sessions are really devoted to giving the child the skills to cope. But just because the child has the skills to cope doesn't mean that at week 11 or 12, they're not going to start exhibiting signs of trauma again or symptoms of trauma again. And so it's not a straight line, and they have ups and downs. And I say 15 to 18 weeks is what it's designed for. Not every child can accomplish it in 15 to 18 weeks. Some need more time. Sometimes we think a child is good and they've graduated from their therapy, and a couple months later, unfortunately they're exhibiting symptoms again and they need to come back to do a little more work. So it's complex. It's not simple, and it's definitely not a straight line. There's a lot of curves.
There's the term PTSD, which we often associate with the military.
Yes.
But civilians also.
Oh, gosh, yes.
So tell me about the PTSD amongst your population.
Yeah, we're really trying to avoid the PTSD. That's if we can get the children early enough, we can really keep them from getting to the point where they have PTSD. We can give them the coping skills and mechanisms to really avoid them getting there. But it is very common for them to have PTSD. They have been through severe trauma, and sometimes the trauma's been ongoing. That's another issue. People think, oh, this thing happened and immediately they come to Kristi House. No, that's actually the rare case. A lot of times the trauma has been ongoing. A child has been abused for years before they're able to step up and tell somebody about it. And so at that point, PTSD is incredibly common. And of course, that's where we come in and really help them deal with that and cope with that and hopefully recover from that.
I'm a little bit confused now about PTSD then, because you're saying you want to get them before they're in PTSD. How does that? I assume that if you've been abused for, let's say, 6 months, you're already in PTSD, or how does that work?
I'm not a clinician, so I'm probably not the best person to address it, but PTSD is more of a long-term. It's not the immediate trauma that you've suffered necessarily. You're not automatically thrown into this post-traumatic stress disorder, which is what PTSD is. So it's a clinical diagnosis, and just because you've suffered trauma doesn't automatically mean that you have post-traumatic stress disorder.
Now you want to get these kids, these young people before they go to PTSD, but once they're in PTSD, there's still hope.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. The therapies that we use are 95% effective. So if the child comes, they stick with it, they, as I say, graduate from their whatever program they're doing with us, 95% of the time, they're going to be okay. That's an incredible statistic.
Now you say a 95% success rate. What does success look like? And what does failure look like? Or not failure, but just, because that's not a good term, but what does non-success look like?
I think non-success is when they're just unable to cope with the trauma for whatever reason. The coping mechanisms, the coping skills, they're still consistently exhibiting signs and symptoms of trauma. And for whatever reason, the methods that are being used are really just not helpful. They might need some more intensive therapies. Maybe they need an inpatient type service to really help them, as opposed to us where we're outpatient. But success is, these kids have learned the coping skills. They've processed the trauma. So typically that means they've done what we call a trauma narrative. And so they've really had to talk through the trauma. Sometimes they write it, sometimes they draw it. There's a variety of methods for how they do their trauma narratives, but they've done that and they've come out on the other side of it and they're ready to move beyond it.
The other day I took a tour of a homeless shelter and I was in the men's section and I'm looking at these men. They're just all like standing around. They're probably doing that all day long. And I thought to myself, these are men who have suffered trauma.
Oh, yes.
What the trauma is, I don't know.
Yeah.
But they've all suffered trauma.
Yes.
So you use that word about trauma, and people don't realize that that's got an adult face to it. And that could be that could be the future homeless person.
Yeah, absolutely. 1 in 2 children will suffer trauma, some sort of trauma, in their childhood. And if it is not dealt with, if there is no intervention, it follows them into adulthood. And so it might be that they may be suffering additional trauma into adulthood. It could be that they just never were able to deal with the trauma they suffered in childhood, but it follows them. An untreated childhood trauma causes all sorts of problems down the road: mental health challenges, physical health challenges, inability to work, resulting in homelessness sometimes. I mean, the domino effect of untreated childhood trauma is extraordinary. The U.S. spends something like $9.1 billion a year.
How much?
About $9.1 billion a year. Putting money towards people who have unaddressed childhood trauma and now are suffering effects of that. And whether that's now they're incarcerated or they have severe mental health issues or they have severe physical health issues, that's a substantial sum of money.
Yeah. And it's so much cheaper if we get them when they're really young.
Yes.
Because, once you're like 40, 50, 60, 70 and you're homeless, that's really hard to get you out of that cycle. Whereas if you're a kid, 12 years old, much easier.
Yes, kids are incredibly resilient and incredibly, able to process things and move on from them.
Yeah, and obviously, to me anyways, it's easier to write off the adults because you'd never write off a 12-year-old. But,
right.
That adult was once that 12-year-old kid.
Yes.
And, what did we do? And so it's so great that Kristi House is here and other partners like Mohair and Chapman and others that are doing just great work.
I think, when we look at the adults, we blame the adults.
Of
You're
course.
less likely to blame the child.
Right.
We blame the adults without giving pause, like you just did, Victor, to the fact that they've probably suffered severe trauma themselves.
Mm-hmm. And, how do I say this without sounding flippant? Because, there is a big problem, but Dade County is only, but we've got about 1,000 homeless people, which
Yeah.
is a pretty statistically very small number.
We've done an incredible job.
we have.
Hats off to Chapman, to Camilla's House, to
Mhm.
the Homeless Trust. I mean, that's where it's really started, is the Homeless Trust in Miami-Dade County. All the work that Ron Book has done.
Who is Ron Book?
Ron is the chairman of the Homeless Trust.
Okay.
And he's also a lobbyist, but he's a huge advocate for the homeless. And the Homeless Trust, there's a 1% food and beverage tax that goes into the Homeless Trust.
Mhm.
And I think that work that the trust does in funding places like Chapman, like Camilla's House, in being, again, sort of a coordinating body, has made a huge difference in Miami-Dade County.
That's great. And just people are listening, that all of your links are going to be in the show notes. It's a super worthy cause.
Thank you.
It's the more I learn about it, the more frightening it is.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, like on your website, there was that word commercial sexual exploitation, just the word commercial, because then you're like, this is a business.
It's a business.
It's a business. It's a frightful business.
It's a business.
And that, in Dade County, like you were saying, we've got an especially big problem here.
Yeah.
Which, if you live in your little suburban bubble, you think, no, it's all good. But no,
Absolutely.
the numbers are, the numbers are what they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this has been very enlightening.
Thank you.
Not very upbeat, although you're doing great work. But you know what? Sometimes you got to be sad to make a difference, because if you're always happy.
Yeah. Surprisingly, I remember when I was first going to Kristi House and somebody told me, oh gosh, fundraising will be so easy because it's a cause for children and everybody wants to help children. But sometimes, again, people don't want to hear about
You want to look
this.
away.
You want to look away.
Yes.
And so it can actually be very challenging fundraising because people don't want to talk about it. My very best friend has told me over the years that it's offensive. Oh my gosh, I agree with you 100%. The topic is totally offensive. But we cannot afford to turn a blind eye. We cannot afford to look away from these things. We have to face them head on. We have to talk about them. It is the only way we can start to lessen the problem.
I see a parallel with the autism world, and I'll tell you why. Very well-meaning people will tell you about, they don't have a disability. They've got a different ability. Well, no, there are kids that will never work, never get married. My daughter's 8 years old. You know how many friends she has? 0. No friends. Every time she said, Daddy, I love you, never. And that might never change. Yeah. So people try to paint this rosy picture, which I guess if you're writing a children's book, okay, maybe. But in real life, there are people that are really struggling. Yeah. And it can't all be like, let's talk, unicorns and rainbows. Because no, there are the extreme cases that people are living.
Absolutely.
And we can't turn a blind eye and pretend that it's not there or say, it's offensive.
Yeah.
Which, it's not offensive. You don't want to hear about it, obviously, but we got to talk about it.
We have to. It is the only way. It is the only way.
Yeah. And awareness is not enough. Like with autism, there was awareness, but now we're at autism action. So with what you're doing, we're at the action phase. It can't just be awareness.
Yes.
Right.
We have to do something about it.
Yeah. Well, I've got 5 last questions I want to ask you. Okay. So the first one is, one word or phrase that best describes Kristi House.
The word I would use is empowering. Empowering. We are empowering these children. We are empowering them to take their lives back. We are empowering them to get justice for themselves. We are empowering them to recover. And I just think it's very empowering. And
you're also empowering the families, because trauma affects the entire family.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Second question, one misconception about your work that needs to disappear forever.
Well, I think we've talked about it, right? People think it is not happening in their backyard, and it is. All of these things are. And really, abuse does not discriminate. It is happening everywhere. Senator Lauren Book, for example, she's Ron Book's daughter, senator from Broward County. She was molested by her nanny for years. She comes from a very well-to-do very educated family. And she speaks about this often, which is why I'm comfortable speaking about it. But I think that is a terrible misconception that it only happens in certain socioeconomic classes and that it is not happening in your backyard. I gave you the statistics earlier. Clearly, it's happening in our own backyards.
Yeah, that brings up another point. Like, take homelessness. Where I live, 0 homeless people. Yeah. So you can just tell yourself, well, there's no homeless people here.
Right.
And there aren't, not where I live. But with sexual abuse, like you said, no, it's happening.
It's happening.
You don't see it, but
right.
it's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. The most important step families should take when seeking support.
Well, I think the most important step for the parents or the caregivers is, first of all, when your child tells you that something's happening to them, you need to believe them. Children do not like to upset the status quo. They don't like to cause problems. So when your child tells you something's happening to them, number one thing, you need to believe them. Number two thing, there is lots of support out there. Go to Kristi House. Call us. You can call us first. You don't have to call law enforcement first. You don't have to call the Department of Children and Families first. I'm not discouraging anybody from doing that, but seek support. It's critical. Don't shove this under the rug because it doesn't go away.
You talk about not ignoring kids. And this reminds me of a story of my sister. She said that a little girl told her daughter, my sister, my niece, that her grandparents were being physically and verbally abusive. Now, for a kid to tell you this, it's got to be really bad.
Yes.
And my sister's like, oh, well, I don't want to get involved. I was like, tag, you're it.
You have to.
You have to. A couple of days later, she's like, oh, you know what? Some of the kids told the teachers and it's being taken care of. But I told my sister, like, tag, you're it.
You have to.
You can't say I don't want to get involved.
No.
You're involved.
Yeah.
You're involved.
And we can call the Department of Children and Families. They have the child abuse hotline, and you can make an anonymous call into the hotline.
What is that number? Okay, but
you were going to ask me that. It's on our website.
Okay, but there's a child abuse hotline. You Google it. I'm sure you're going to find it.
Google it, yes, and you can call there and make an anonymous complaint into the hotline.
That's amazing.
Yes,
that's amazing. I'm so glad that we have that resource. Next question: if you had a billboard on I-95, what message would you put on it?
Oh God, I think I would keep it pretty simple. End child abuse.
Yeah.
We've done some that have said very simply, stop sex trafficking. I think that we need something similar to that for just general child abuse.
Well, okay. Talking about that, let me ask you a question about that. What would be like the one big lever you could push that would make like the biggest impact if that lever existed?
Well, I think that we need to do a better job of holding the Johns accountable. So we're looking.
These are the victimizers.
These are the ones who are buying.
The abusers.
The ones who are buying.
The customers.
The customers.
The Johns. Okay.
No, it's okay.
It's
the ones who are buying this. So if we're talking about the sex trafficking, you've got to hold the people accountable.
The customer.
Who is the customer? Okay. We're looking to go after the trafficker. Of course you want to do that, right? But you've got to get the people who are paying for it. Because if there's no demand, you don't need a supply. We've got to stop the demand.
It reminds me, I was one time in this town in the jungle, in the Amazon jungle in Peru. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of sex trade there because you'd see like these older white men hand in hand with these little Indian boys, and you just saw it. And I was like, that's who we got to go after. Because the ones who were trafficking the kids were the parents.
Yeah.
So that's hard to go after.
It's hard, yes.
So yeah, you're right. Going after customers.
Got to go after the customers.
Yes, make it so like it's like the word gets out in their circles that they're in that Miami is not welcoming. And that could be done.
That could be done.
That could be done.
Yes.
That could be, because like these guys over in Peru, just arrest them.
Yeah.
You see what's going on. So, okay. That's Peru.
I think we need more people in general too, to just stand out, speak out against this. More people stepping up. And again, we've discussed this, that it's hard for people to want to talk about these things, but we need more people who are willing to go public and say, I stand firmly against this. And I mean, we know you stand against it. I stand against it. All these, the
But
general
everybody stands
population
against it.
stands against
Yeah.
it. But we need people who are actively speaking out against it.
Well, let me ask you a question. Let's say, like, I'm against it. I'm talking about it here, but I'm not doing that much. How could like a person who's watching right now say, okay, I want to be one of your champions? What could they do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a form you can fill out on our website, www.kristihousecac.org, to become a volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is being an ambassador for the organization and being willing to post on social media and speak sometimes and speak out against this. We're actually also, we're doing a little bit of rebranding this year. It's
Mm-hmm.
like I said, it's been our 30th anniversary. So we're just kind of doing a refresh of our logo and a few other things. And along with that, we're starting a men's task force. So we're getting together a group of men who are willing to use their voice and their platform to do social media campaigns with us, to do hopefully some other campaigns with us, to really say, I stand against this, not in my city. I will not continue to allow this to happen in my city.
Yeah, not in Miami. Okay, one final question. Finish the sentence. We'll know this work is making a real impact when?
Well, I think we already know it's making a real impact. I mean, we can certainly see that with the number of children that we're able to help. But I think when you're talking about eradicating these problems, we have to see the numbers just over time really go down. We see fluctuations in the numbers sometimes. So, for example, I can tell you that for the last year or so, calls into the Department of Children and Families hotline have decreased. I do not think that's because the problem is getting better. I think that people are not reporting it as much for a variety of reasons. So I think we need over time, over 5 years, over 10 years, to really see that the number of reports are going down.
Now, you can't eradicate sexual abuse in the home.
No.
But I do think that you could eradicate the business of sexual abuse.
I hope so.
Is that like a doable goal, you think?
I hope so. I agree with you that you cannot eradicate sexual abuse entirely. The commercial sexual exploitation of children, I think you could eradicate that.
I think you could do. Okay.
Yes.
Well, Amanda, let's turn to the camera. We'll sign off here. This has been the Autism Podcast with Amanda Altman, CEO of Kristi House. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.